Welcome to the Nerds and Friends podcast. I'm Josh Lindquist, and my co-host Carey DuVal is joining me. Our other
Hey, Josh.
co-hosts may hop on later, but today we have Taylor Stanecek with us, joining us to talk about his new book, Bad Blood. We're very excited to have you here, Taylor. Thanks so much for hopping on the podcast. Can you start off by telling us about your book, telling us a little bit what it's about?
Absolutely, Josh, and thank you guys. Thank you for having me and giving me this opportunity to come on your podcast. So, as a brief, quick synopsis, Bad Blood is it's an LGBT coming of age novel that focuses on the harsh reality of family dysfunction and abuse. But this story shows the perspective of someone from the outside looking in. It's a high school student named Chase who wants to rescue his crush named Dylan from their destructive home environment.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, as many of us have already known from experience, with meddling comes unintended consequences, and we want to see the world in black and white. And wanting to see it in black and white is usually our first harsh lesson that we have to face because, well, I mean, truth be told, nothing is ever as simple as it seems.
Yeah, that's a really compelling story, though. Now I'm like, well, I have to know what happens. Like, does he get Dylan out? Like, is everything okay? Like, oh man, that's awesome. So
That legitimately sounds like a really poignant story that'll probably hit home with a lot of people. What brought you by that idea? What brought you by a concept like that?
So it's definitely a lot to do with my own experiences. As coming of age, it's to relate a lot to high school experiences. And I know a lot of LGBT books usually take place in high school, and I think that's just because a lot of people are coming out at that time, starting to learn about their sexual orientation. And it was definitely an experience for me because I was in that position of feeling like I wanted to help someone who was going through a hard time. And in a sense, it was also to kind of gain their interest because it was a crush. It was almost that idea of thinking that you can win them over by rescuing them from their problems that they're having, their dysfunction at home, in order to gain that relationship that you're looking for. So that's where the idea came into play. It was early high school for me, and then from there I just kept writing over the years, and it turned into a novel. Yeah.
That's really like. So, did you start writing this in high school, like kind of, like shortly after you were going through similar things, and then you kind of wrote it, finished it in adulthood, kind of with that retrospective lens? I'm curious about that.
Oh, absolutely. I started in probably my junior or senior year of high school writing this out because
That's awesome.
it was a lot of passion that I had in writing even before high school. So I decided I wanted to see what could come out if I started to write a story similar to some experiences that I've had. And I know from my own, like from friends and everything like that, that these experiences aren't just a rare occurrence. It happens to a lot of people, not just in the LGBT community, but everyone in general. Sometimes they feel that a crush that they have, they want to help them in some way or another to be able to maybe earn their respect or to build some sort of relationship on that ground. But yes, the idea came in high school, and I started to write it back then. Over the years, I worked on it more and more. I polished it. I had professional editors.
Awesome.
And then the cover was finally completed, and now I'm excited. 10 years later.
Hey, that's how long it takes for some books, man. That's awesome. And for everyone listening, we're definitely going to have a link to where they can buy the book in the video or podcast description. So be sure to check that out. But
Absolutely.
no, I think that's a fascinating concept because, especially with that, I think that idea of trying to rescue someone you're interested in is a very common thing that people fall into, but especially when you add the high school element, because when you're still like in school like that, like your family has so much control over you that it really adds an interesting dynamic. And so I'm curious how that plays into the story, And by the way, real quick, Taylor, this is our other co-host, Will. Will, this is Taylor. Hello.
Yep. We got Will.
Hey, Will. Hey, nice to meet you.
I love the cat cameo in the background. Our podcast always has to have a cat cameo. It's like a thing now. So
there's one hidden in every video. You just really got to look for them.
Yep.
And sometimes you need to watch it multiple times because sometimes the cat is there and then is not there in certain videos. So that's to everybody who is a fan of these videos and podcasts. You have to go back, and multiple listens is probably good. But for those of us just tuning in, we are talking with author Taylor Stanecek about the book Bad Blood, which has themes of what did I want to say? Trying to rescue a crush and inadvertently making things worse for yourself and potentially spidering out the situation in a bad way. So
yeah, it really kind of plays on the idea of that. Yeah. Oh, no, you did great. It really plays on that idea of being in high school, having that early, I guess it's more of a naive sense before you really learn how the world truly works, and you're trying to do something that is not, you're not very familiar with, because you're reaching out to a different family who has their own dynamics, and you're not familiar with that kind of thing. So it definitely plays on that. Thank you for that. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and being at that age too, I mean, emotions are so much more intense, and like you're really, experiencing things that are vastly different from the whole of your previous life, which was like childhood, which was totally different. So I feel like looking back on like when I was in high school, a lot of the feelings I had just all around about life were so much more like intense than the feelings I have now, because they were so new and fresh, and I didn't really have anchor points with which to like, compare them or like, bring them down. So I can't wait to read your book, man. This sounds like a really fascinating, like delving into all the different variables that can come into play in a relationship in someone's life at that stage. That's really cool.
Well, that's
Thank
the
you,
time when
Josh.
you're building those anchor points in a big way, is like that's what high school is for. It's that raw, or that's what those adolescent years are for. That's that raw emotion. It's your first time actually feeling a lot of this stuff. And it kind of sounds like a big way of like, well, figuring out who you are going to be for the rest of your life, or in some people's experience, mine included, kind of figuring out who you don't want to be for the rest of your life. Like if this is a way that you want to be, which I'm curious, Taylor, on that respect. Tell us about the main character, or at least the point of view character. Like what's the personality? What drives this character? What where did he come from, or where did they come from?
So the character of Chase Blansk, actually, he in the story, he's very like I said, he is a little naive in these things. One thing that's really important to note too is that he's already comfortably out. He has a mother who has already given him affection for coming out about his sexuality, being gay, and so we are able to already have that established, which is nice. And I also want to bring into the fact that I wanted to write an LGBT story about that was outside the all too common closeted jock and romantic forbidden love kind of thing. With Chase, we've already introduced the character as being comfortable with his sexual orientation. It already passes that first challenge that most readers nowadays are already familiar with and have plenty of books to relate to, honestly. It puts the reader in a new experience that isn't as commonly written about, especially for this like genre of coming of age and very focused on abuse and family dynamic. What I'm essentially saying is that it puts the LGBT concept second in the story, to show that stories can be written about the LGBT community without it being the main plot of the story. Which is something I really found to be a great way to help the LGBT community have more books out there for.
That's awesome.
Well, the first thing being, is it an interesting character? Is it an interesting story? Like you might have a point behind it, but like whether or not the story is the interesting thing, or the complete thing, or the compelling thing, is kind of really tantamount. And it sounds like that's kind of your that was the foot forward you wanted to put.
Yeah. I mean, the idea behind Chase was that I know that a lot of people in high school, especially, and I think a lot of readers are going to be my audience is going to be mostly made up of people who are currently in high school or have experienced this back in high school or college, maybe, or whatever time frame in their life, and they can easily relate to something like that, and it makes them feel either feel like they have someone to relate to, or maybe some kind of nostalgic feelings, whatever it might be. But Chase has this naive kind of personality, because even though he is comfortably out, this crush of his, Dylan Payton, is his first real significant crush. This is someone that he really genuinely wants to pursue. His friends around him believe that Dylan Payton is also interested in him, but there's no, clear indication of that yet. So the story is really, twofold. It's Chase trying to move forward to build a relationship with Dylan, and then at the same time see how he can help Dylan fight the demons at home.
Wow, that's a cool dynamic, because you're really exploring two very, very complex plot lines that are interwoven, it sounds like, and that's really cool. As a fellow writer, I'm getting goosebumps. I'm like, that sounds really interesting, that's cool, man. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it's also kind of changing that dynamic that we normally see in media. And you kind of mentioned this before, there's a ton of stories about coming to terms with your own sexuality and trying to figure out who you are. And it sounds like our main character might already have gone through that and have figured that out, and is now having to kind of see others dealing with those problems that they themselves either didn't deal with or have already dealt with.
That's absolutely true too. One thing that I also wanted to note too is that throughout the book is it's a question of, we know that Chase is openly gay. He has a friend who's openly gay who's really helping him too throughout the story. But the question through a lot of the story is Dylan gay? We kind of get these rumors, the hearsay, the gossip throughout high school that goes back to Chase of it being, is he gay? We know from past experience in the story that he's apparently dated some, girls, but he also shows interest in Chase as more than just a friend, possibly. So it's just one of those things too, where it plays on the role of trying to figure out, is Chase, going for someone who is actually gay and actually interested in him. And so that's also a part of the story too. The dynamic at home for Dylan Payton isn't like the parents are necessarily against him being gay. It's just a destructive, dysfunctional family in general. It's problems that have to do with a lot of things. When you have sibling rivalry, parents that fight, parents that do things that the children don't necessarily agree with. Maybe the parents are too strict, or it's a lot of factors, and it can get very dangerous, I guess. Yeah. I guess that's the best way to put it.
I love that you have so many nuances and real life stuff. Go ahead, Carey, but I just love all the complexity here. It's fascinating,
Well, there's nuance, there's complexity, and that's honestly one thing that is given a lot of lip service in the story, but not actually fully addressed in an interesting or compelling way. I mean, when somebody does nail that, that's when you get Hugo Awards. That's when you get Oscars. Ordinary People, or heck, I'm thinking of three, four different Dustin Hoffman movies. But there's a good chunk of there are a lot of fun stories that are black and white. This is right, this is not. There are a couple. There are a lot of really good stories that toe the line, but the ones that are that really compel and really break the mold are actually the ones that kind of show people as people, because you can give a character a couple of different aspects. You can give them a couple of different things that they are This is what like this is their flaw, this is their strength, like this is their general personality. You can go real deep building a character. But when it comes down to it, a character is still a grouping of aspects of personality, whereas a human being is like everything is on a spectrum. And everything can change absolutely day to day. Like you can be absolutely one way with some people and absolutely another way with some other people, especially back in high school when you're trying to figure yourself out.
Yeah.
And a big part of that discovery, I think for me, a big part of that discovery is kind of figuring out like how can you like actually just be you and only you, and really not care what other people think, or like not really try to impress people. And I mean that's just kind of like speaking on a personal level for me, but that to me is what speaks to like an actual like a character arc from the sound of it.
Well, that's what, from what you've told us in the book, has resonated the most with me. Is it sounds like a really in-depth character study, but I like that you're not starting out with the character, going through this big life milestone of coming out and everything. I like that he's already come out and now he's going through another life milestone of, okay, my first, relationship that he's really invested in, and then kind of figuring out how can I interact with someone I care about this way as well as their family. And so he's kind of he's already figured out a lot of who he is, but kind of who he wants to be in relation to others. I think that's really cool. So I'm excited to read your book, man.
Yeah,
that's
Josh,
awesome.
It's a life lesson, really. I mean, it really brings in that first harsh lesson, like I was saying. It teaches us like the big things that we learn about in high school, I think, are these like first harsh lessons that we have to endure from experience. And you have your friends on the sidelines in high school with you saying, "Oh, don't do that," but you think like better. You're like, I think that's not a big deal. You're just overreacting, and then you experience, and you're like, damn, you were right. You're right. I should have listened to you. It's those experiences that we have to learn, by experience that really train us to figure out who we are. And Carey brings up a great point too about it being blurred too. About it's not just clear black and white. I wanted a story that really had a lot of gray in it. I wanted it to be almost lifelike. It's about just what can go wrong, what might happen doing this, what are the consequences in impacting something like that. And I don't necessarily want to hold back on certain things because it helps us to better relate to the story. And another point being that Chase thinks, and it seems like he's kind of like this Mary Sue character in the very beginning. He seemed almost too perfect because he's a go-getter. He's very passionate. He's very motivated and driven. He's got great grades and things like that. But it also shows that in one light you can see yourself as that at the beginning of the story, and start showing your flaws throughout the book. And so that was also something that I wanted to go about, because a lot of people would say, you don't want a Mary Sue character. Well, how about a Mary Sue character that you think is a Mary Sue in the beginning, but turns out to be, they have their flaws, they have their problems, and you get to learn about them as they're going through them in early years of their life. So.
Well, a flawed character is to me infinitely more interesting than a perfect character for a lot of reasons. Like
I think the main one being that perfect people don't exist, whereas everyone's flawed. So you get that. Yeah.
Well, it's one of the reasons why reading like old school Superman, like super old school Superman, never really appealed to me. But I always really liked growing up. My favorite superhero was Daredevil, and it wasn't just because all of the Frank Miller Daredevil run trades were at my local library and we didn't have a comic shop in Greeley, Colorado, that I had access to. It was because Daredevil always got the shit end of the stick while doing the right thing. And actually the TV show kind of nailed that too in a really big way, where it's just like he's doing things to be a good person, to espouse his his ideals, to like really fight for what's right. And the thing is and you know, I know this isn't a comic tirade, but like this is one of my favorite storylines of all time. One of the legitimate, like, most impactful comic book storylines I've ever read in my life was Daredevil went and messes with Kingpin, and Kingpin finds out his secret identity and doesn't go after Daredevil. He goes and systematically tears apart Matt Murdock's life over the course of like an issue.
Another
And
cat cameo. Look at that.
Another cat cameo. This is Rorschach.
Hi,
And
Rorschach.
yeah, and
and I appreciate that as well. That is great writing. That's great technique in like storytelling, is to do what you think, you know, like it's almost like zagging when people think you're gonna zig. You're introducing this new plot line and turning it into this really more complex story that can be much harsher to the characters. And I like that. I think that that's a great example of it, like showing, you know, the dynamic between you know, a bad villain and a good villain, a bad, you know, superhero and a great superhero, how you can really form a story to really get somewhere with it and draw in a good audience. Because something like that, a story like that, sounds extremely intriguing. You know, it's not just the whole, you know, oh, you're caught by, you know, this person, they're going to go and tell on you kind of thing. It's more like, what are they going to use it against you for, you know?
Yeah. Well, because not everything, not everybody acts in friggin' like, not everybody does entirely honest things, not everybody does entirely dishonest things. And not everybody like to bring up another like thing that was actually really well done. If you remember that Lincoln movie, when it came down to Lincoln talking to Tommy Lee Jones's character, and Tommy Lee Jones's character going like, nope, it's abolished slavery, period. That's what it is. They need to be equal citizens. And Lincoln going like, well, listen, like, you can have a compass and you can head straight north, and if that is the direction, you can, but you're gonna walk straight through swamps, and you could fall into a canyon. Like going in one direction without looking at the nuances of the things around you can lead to destruction, as opposed to getting the thing done that you want to get done. And yeah, I like that with characters, and it kind of sounds like you've made a interestingly complex storyline like that.
Yeah. It took 10 years, like I said, in the making. So it really built on that idea of just drawing in from more experiences, you know, and capturing a greater essence. Of course, the first time I had written the story out, it was very simplistic. And then I wrote it again and again, and I kept, you know, editing myself, you know, and changing it and drawing in more ideas over the years, just from my own experiences and my own practice.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's that is a great way to put it, is that you know, trying to create that dynamic is it's not a simple task, but once you find it, it kind of is like a snowball effect. You learn how to branch out. It really gets really complex, and it's fun, and it really is.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to ask, like, what advice would you give to aspiring writers? Because I know everyone has their own path to getting their first book done, but I really like how you started off with something that was really close to what you knew. You were very close to the source material, and then over time you built it and refined it and got it like right where you wanted it. Like, so if someone was saying, hey, I'm thinking about writing a book, I have an idea, what would be the advice that you'd give them now as a published author?
So Josh, that is a great question, because I do have a lot of people that say, how did you do that? How did you continue writing and have the patience to be able to finally publish a book after years of working on it? Because a lot of people tell me that they reach out to, they try to write a story, and some of them can't even finish it. You know, after a couple weeks, they're burned out. They don't want to go any further. And then some of them get really discouraged after writing it, and they can't find publishers, or they're afraid to have editors read it because they don't want them to tear their book apart and stuff. My advice is, when you want to start writing, if you know, first, have a passion for writing, because honestly, that is going to be the most compelling part, the most the drive that you have in working on it, because writing a book is not an easy task. Some writers, obviously, they do it full time. You see a lot of people who can pump out books really fast. I mean, people like J.K. Rowling, and I'm sure Stephanie Meyer, even Stephen King. These are people that do it for a living. They just write. That's all they do. It's like their job. But for some people like me, it's a hobby. And I only, do maybe a couple pages here and there a day. I reread a lot of the stuff that I write because maybe it was a week ago that I wrote it, and now I need to go back on and then try to brainstorm and build it more. And a lot of times too, when I'm doing other activities, it's, I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking about the scene that I just wrote. So it takes a lot of time. Definitely, I would say, you need a lot of patience to be able to write a story. And then most importantly, don't feel discouraged if something goes wrong. I can't tell you the amount of times that I had to rewrite scenes or change character dynamics because I just felt like it wasn't working, and I was far into the story. I mean, this is not a short story. This is a novel that has over 100,000 words. It takes a long time to write. Comparatively, I think that for example, I think that it's the second or third book by J.K. Rowling of the Harry Potter series. It's kind of like that length, and it takes time to write something like that. But I would say you need to have the drive, the patience. Don't feel discouraged if you have to do things over and over. Practice makes perfect. It takes a lot of time and effort. And if you truly want to, you want to write a story and make it, something that you want to publish one day, take the time. Definitely don't feel like you need to rush. And then also don't feel discouraged when you're looking for, professional editors, professional cover artists. I will say that I was lucky. I found a great a great editor very, very fast.
That's awesome.
It was a little costly, but sometimes the saying, you have to spend money to make money, and editing is extremely important if you do want to publish. And then the cover artist took me a good year to find. I went through 5 or 6 cover artists before I found the right one to hire and move forward with that. So that took a lot of time and patience. And there were some times when I felt like it was almost pulling teeth to find the right person. But definitely, if you have a knack for writing and you have a story that you want to tell, do it for yourself first. Write it as if you're telling the story just for yourself. Don't do it for an audience that you think you want to be the next Stephen King or Stephanie Meyer or J.K. Rowling. Do it for yourself to first, to feel that like you're not doing this for anyone else. So that's where your drive is coming from, because then you're going to want to keep going.
That's excellent advice. That's all around.
I like that a lot.
I wholeheartedly agree. And I just want our listeners to understand how extensive it is to write over 100,000 words. This is my book. This is 76,000 words. So just for our audience to visualize what you're talking about, that's, so yeah.
And Josh, how long did it take you to write that?
It took me, I had the story kind of plotted out for a couple years, and then during the pandemic, I sat down and cranked it out, and it took me about 2 years to I did that book, and one that actually Will did the cover art for here, so he did that. Awesome.
Oh, yes.
Awesome. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah.
So but this one's short. It's this one's 53,000 words, so it's pretty short for a fantasy novel. Yeah. But no, that's awesome.
Well, those short pulpy ones though are just
But you wrote about what you were familiar with, what you loved, what you were, what you had in mind. It wasn't just something that you felt that it was something that you felt that was just it was big right now. Like, I know a lot of people are writing about vampire stories because it's a big topic, I guess.
I think it'd be really hard to slog out a book if I didn't feel some connection to the material,
Exactly. Yeah.
My second book is kind of a fun fantasy adventure, which is like the kind that I would want to read to just kind of unwind. But my first book was it was an examination of my relationship with religion. over the course of my
Mhm.
life, how I kind of grew up with it and then got super religious and then lost it, and I'm an atheist now. So kind of going through that journey, which was something I really wanted to tell, through a character's eyes. So yeah, the first book especially was really, I felt like I had to like get the story out, and that's why I think your advice is perfect, is you have to have
Mhm.
some connection to it, and like that makes it impactful. Like, it doesn't matter how many people it resonates with, as long as it resonates with at least someone. There's that instant moment of like, someone gets me, and like it's so gratifying as an author. So
Mhm.
I think your
Yeah.
advice is spot on. I mean, about the trade stuff, taking time to do
Mhm.
it right, taking time to get an editor, a good cover artist like Will, and also like really taking the time to like choose what you want your book to be like, but then really having that connection to the source material. I think that's huge. So excellent advice.
Yeah.
A lot of our listeners are people interested in writing, so this is really cool. I think it's going to be
Yeah.
really, really helpful.
And I think that's like a really important point that I think ends up getting overlooked a lot is when you are dealing with any type of art form, it's not just the time that it takes to actually make the thing. You also have to factor in the time that it takes to build up the skills so that you're
Mhm.
able to make the thing. Because I'm sure, like, how close is what you ended up with here after 10 years to what you had initially envisioned?
That is a great point too, Will. It was quite different back in high school when I was writing it. I was very unfamiliar with a lot of writing styles back in high school, as probably a lot of us were experiencing. I wasn't a big reader. I would always read the books that we were given in high school, but outside of that, I wasn't reading a lot of books. So I was unfamiliar with a lot of writing styles, things like that. It wasn't until I got into college when I actually started taking these writing classes, the grammar classes, creative writing classes, these things that you're actually learning about. I got into different types of writers like Faulkner, how he has a very specific type of writing.
Mhm.
And then you have Ernest Hemingway, who's almost on the opposite end, where he has very, simplistic writing, but both of them were very successful in their time. And you learn about the ins and outs of these different types of writers and how they came to be, what made them famous. But my first time writing this story was far different from what it eventually turned into. And over the years, just from my own experiences, my all the classes that I took through college, all the
Mhm.
books that I read, I learned how to better integrate things. I learned how to better word things too, because when we're growing up, we try to figure out if we're not like really familiar with something, like a term for it. We're like, we don't know how to define it. We don't know how to we can describe it. It's almost
Yeah.
like trying to describe a color that you don't know the name of the color.
Yeah.
So when
Yeah.
you're writing, you're like, how do I word that? And then you start reading other people's works and you realize that's exactly what I wanted to say. That's exactly how, I never thought, like, yeah, it's very important to learn how other writers write. Definitely pick up a lot of books of people who have been successful with writing, and you'll learn a lot from them. But yeah, it took years to perfect my story, and it's far different from what it started from. Definitely.
Well, and that's
Oh, yeah.
that's textbook finding your voice. Like I'm still working on mine personally, and when it comes down to writing, like a lot of it is like you are one of those things that kept me from writing for a very, very, very long time was the thought of like having to be original. And the problem, and like, yes, you want to be original, you want to come up with something unique, you want to come up with your own version of something, but the big thing is like you are one way or another going to be an amalgamation of the things that you love. And a lot of the best things that you read, watch, see as far as a comic book or anything else, I think comic books specifically because I'm very in love with the medium. You see the aggregation of what people enjoy in what they create. And when it hits, it ends up being just fantastic. And that I think is a lot more important. Like it's kind of what I said. It sounds like you nailed. It's about telling that good story. It's not about telling the unique story. Like people have told the King Arthur story about 100 different ways. And the thing that makes the difference between each different version of that is what's your take on it? You know, even if the plot line isn't necessarily different, you know, there are a lot of different versions of the movie Die Hard that came out after Die Hard came out because there was a good formula that came out. And a couple of them are standalone good on their own, aside from the fact that they are very clearly inspired by Die Hard. So that's
I love how you guys are making these like really poignant points and observations, and I'm here fighting with my cat who's like nibbling on a power cord. I'm like, stop it!
Yeah,
You're gonna get electrocuted. Stop it!
I was noticing that in the background. Our third cat cameo of the show is just
me doing this behind my computer. Yeah. Yeah.
But I think like what Carey's point is, it goes back to that old adage of good artists copy, great artists steal, of where it's very true, because like no matter what you do, if you do end up telling that wholly original story that's never been told before, that nobody has any point of reference, nobody's going to read it or want to read it, because nobody's going to be able to relate to that. Because I think that's kind of the biggest point of like, when you're making any piece of art, you're trying to have it relate to people and have people be able to experience that and have it impact their lives in a way that they can actually understand and take something from.
Yeah. Write what you know. Don't write what you think people are going to enjoy. Write what you've experienced, maybe what you've like experienced in your lifetime. Write things that you know about. Don't necessarily dive into things that you're not very familiar with without doing a lot of research. But definitely do write about your own experiences and what you know about, because it's very likely that other people can relate to that, and if you know, like if it's something unique, then people will find it as inspiring to learn more about.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a big important thing, as well, as when you're talking about taking your time, of being able, when you do take your time, you're kind of, at least in your mind, living in that world, and you can kind of figure out different things about that world that if you just try to rush something out in like a week or an afternoon, you're not going to be able to understand the different nuances that need to be communicated within any piece.
Yeah, I agree with
that. But if that story hits and you can crank it out in 36 hours and it ends up being good, hit that too.
Yeah. I
that's the dream, right?
That,
Fast writing is not necessarily bad writing.
But yeah. And if you you'll have your good days and you'll have your bad days. I've had plenty of bad days, trust me, sometimes bad weeks or even months where I try to write and nothing's coming out, or every time I write something, it just doesn't, it's just not working. But just step away from the computer, relax, it's okay. It's like some people, they're like, this is the end for me, this is it, I can't do this. But if we just take a breather, step back, come back, look at it again, and try later. I've had to do that many times for those passionate writers who want to become published authors. Don't feel discouraged if you're having a bad week or even a bad month. It sometimes can draw on. It really can. But it will come back if you're really passionate about it. Think about it. When you have time to yourself, just kind of brainstorm some more, or give yourself some space to let your mind relax, and it'll come back to you. But yeah, we have our good days. There are days when I'm just writing page after page. It's just coming out and it's like gold. And then there's days when I'm stuck on like one sentence for hours and I have to step away.
Yep. I think that's excellent advice, and that's a great note to like kind of wrap up the podcast right now, because I know Carey's got to run soon for something. But no, that's perfect advice, because I think that, like you said, you got to write for yourself, because at the end of the day, you're gonna hit obstacles, and like if it's something you're passionate about, you'll be able to overcome those through whatever ways you need to overcome them, and have that consistency to come back. So Taylor, thank you so much for coming on our podcast. This has been wonderful. And like, I'm all motivated to like re-examine my writing and get better into it. And I can't wait to read your book. So again, for everyone who listened, Taylor's book's going to be, the link's going to be in the podcast description. Go check it out. And we just really appreciate having you on, man. Thanks so much for your time.
Yes, thank you, Josh. Thank you, Carey, and thank you, Will. It was a pleasure getting to speak with all of you. This was a great opportunity, and if you ever are interested in having me back on, I'd love to talk some more about other things too, or maybe potential books in the future. This is only book one of a trilogy, so that the other two will be coming out soon.
That's awesome.
But yeah. I would love to, any other time you guys want to invite me back on, we can.
We'll take you up on that, my friend. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Well, this has been Nerds with Friends. Thanks so much for listening, everyone.